You're listening to a
Nowhere Bros
podcast, a not-so-serious look at the happenings in music.
Bowie.
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 Bowie. Good afternoon.
Kia ora.
This is podcast number 2 of our new Nowhere Bros series, looking at the happenings in music. I hope you enjoyed our first podcast. We ran into problems with the copyright people on YouTube, and all our music got taken away, and then they took our whole bloody podcast down, so I'm sorry about that. We're looking at putting out our podcasts from now on either SoundCloud or something else, where hopefully we can have music, because as much as, you know, I'm sure you'd love to listen to us just talk amongst ourselves, it's really nice to have some music in the background, and just so you know what we're talking about.
Unless we try to imitate the music ourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could do our own covers of what we're talking about, but, you know, that could vary in quality. But anyway, moving on. Today we're doing a very special edition of our podcast series. We're looking at the life and work of David Bowie.
The late David Bowie.
The late David Bowie, or David Robert Jones, as he was born, the Brixton native. He, of course, passed away about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. Caught everyone by surprise, really. I mean, I was gobsmacked when I heard the news. I thought it was a hoax.
So did I, yeah.
And then his son confirmed it on social media, and it was just devastating, really. I've never really been upset about the death of a celebrity or a musician before, but I was just, oh, God, I was...
I'm still in the process of recovering.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've recovered, but you can continue to be in the process. That's fine.
Just hearing people say David Bowie was...
Yes. So we're going to be doing a David Bowie special. We're going to go through the different stages of his career, starting with his early life and his early career, and his different phases and personas and musical styles. And we're going to also look at his influences, his legacy, some of the other things he did. And we're going to end by, well, apart from ending with about his legacy and stuff, we'll also talk about Blackstar and his death. And so it's going to be a bit of everything. We'll see how we go.
It's just going to be our tribute.
It is. It's going to be a tribute. So I thought we're going to start with his pre-Ziggy period, I've called it, on our notes. So this is sort of 1966 to 1972. And a lot was sort of happening as he tried to establish himself as an artist in this period. So he was born in Brixton, as I said, David Robert Jones, in South London on January the 8th, 1947. And he came from a working class family and background. His mother was a waitress. His father was a charity promotions officer. And as a youngster, he had... well, you can tell the story.
So he had a bit of a reputation as a brawler. He got into a few fights when he was growing up, and probably his most infamous fight was the one with his friend George Underwood, where he damaged his left eye to the point where his depth perception became damaged, and he had a dilated pupil, which gave the impression that his eye was a different colour. But interestingly, they still had a good close friendship, and actually Underwood designed a few of Bowie's early album covers.
There you go. And his early inspirations were 1950s rhythm and blues, doo-wop and rock and roll, much, I guess, the same with a lot of his contemporaries and peers. And when he first heard Tutti Frutti by Little Richard, he said he had heard God. So there you go. So during this period, he explored several different styles and fashions as he tried to sort of discover himself a bit. He did a lot of theatre, and he was a mimer. And he started off, musically speaking, on his first album as a bit of a mod. His first self-titled album contains a lot of kind of psychedelic poppy kind of mod. He dresses in suits with his kind of moddy style haircut, and influenced a lot, I guess, by the Kinks and the Small Faces. And you can hear in some of the songs quite sort of interesting, quirky pop going on here. You know, Uncle Arthur. Uncle Arthur loves his muesli. Uncle Arthur goes home to church.
Rubber band.
Rubber band. My little bombardier.
So very sort of antiquated British silliness.
It's very, very sort of Kinks kind of thing. Very mixed album, I'd have to say. There's some really cool songs on there, like Uncle Arthur and all that, but at the same time, there's a lot of just shake your head kind of stuff, really.
But a very interesting starting point.
It's fair to say he wouldn't do anything quite like that again. Yeah, so that was his first album, and then he moved on. It became a bit of like grew his hair long. It became a bit of a hippie, folky kind of thing. Toured with Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yep.
And played one of the first incarnations of Glastonbury, and You see that on his album Space Oddity, where he's playing a lot of acoustic guitar and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of moves towards, I think, bringing in sort of more rocky influences on his third album, The Man Who Sold the World, when he brought in Mark Ronson to play and also Tony Visconti to produce. And that was kind of the start of one of his early partnerships, musically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And on the music on that album, you can tell there's a lot more sort of rocky influences and moving away definitely from the more acoustic-y, folky stuff of Space Oddity.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, when he would promote that album, Man Who Sold the World, he would, like, on the album cover, he's wearing that dress. And he would wear that dress when he would promote the album.
Right.
And he would get sort of mixed reactions on the street. I think he went on tour in America, and someone saw him, and people were freaking out, and someone pulled a gun on him and said, "Kiss my ass."
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what he did there. And his first genuine sort of classic album is, of course, Hunky Dory. And that's where he sort of combined what he'd done pre-Man Who Sold the World with what he was doing on Man Who Sold the World. So a bit of folk, a bit of pop, a bit of rock. The art influences, of course, he was very influenced by Syd Barrett, Andy Warhol, Velvet Underground. And I think it all came together on this one brilliant album where he kind of was starting to get things together.
And the kind of Space Oddity influence as well. You've got Life on Mars, so it's a recurrence of the space alien theme. And as you look throughout Bowie's career, that's like something, a thematic point that kind of is quite strong throughout a lot of his work.
And that was his first also commercial breakthrough. Went to number 3 in the UK and is still genuinely considered today one of his best works.
One of my favourite albums of his.
It's definitely in my top 5, yep. So, so again, that was Mick Ronson was on there and Tony Visconti, and that was kind of when things started to go in the right direction with Bowie, because by that stage he was 24 and he'd already tried for about 5 years or so to get things going musically and was going nowhere really, so it was kind of almost last chance saloon for him. And then of course we get to 1972 and Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars comes out, and of course this is genuinely considered the album that broke him as a major sort of artist. And this is entering his period that we're going to call here his glam and Ziggy period, Ziggy
glam.
Bowie period, where he kind of went with the times, because glam rock was becoming a big thing with T-Rex and Roxy Music and Slade and all of that stuff, and he kind of fit well into that.
Gary Glitter.
Well, I wasn't going to mention Gary Gaza, but there you go. Yeah, and with this he transformed into this character, which was kind of his first ever persona, called Ziggy, who was like a rock superhero sort of fantasy figure kind of thing, coming to save rock from the demons of I don't know what, but he was there. He was like a space cadet. There's a famous footage movie of the Ziggy tour, and there's a fan who says, "I love Ziggy. I'm the space cadet and he's the commander." It was like, yeah. So it was a big deal because no one had really taken on like a persona before like this and sort of become a character.
The Beatles had kind of set that kind of in motion with Sgt. Pepper's, but they hadn't like toured
like that,
as
or
Sgt. Pepper,
did interviews.
Hadn't gone the next step, but Bowie took that next step.
He literally became Ziggy.
Yeah, and it was inspired partly when he went to see Iggy Pop when he was touring in America in the early 70s for promotion for that Man Who Sold the World tour.
Right.
And he saw Iggy as sort of like a savior of rock, because, you know, he was that very kind of aggressive, animalistic, proto-punk, and also in fusion with Lou Reed, so he wanted to create what he would describe as the ultimate pop idol in Ziggy Stardust.
I think it's also important to mention his half-brother Terry Burns, who was a massive influence on his early career. Terry Burns was a schizophrenic and influenced the character of Ziggy and the formation of it, because Bowie, of course, was very influenced by sort of madness and sort of that sort of thing. I mean, he was influenced by Syd Barrett as well, and you can kind of see this all coalescing into this Ziggy persona or character taking on a different persona to yourself. And also, I think moving from David Jones to David Bowie was also kind of linked in with that, because I read recently, and I think it was his wife speaking in one of his obituaries, that to her he was always just David Jones and David Bowie was this other person. And I think that's kind of the theme that's kind of began with Ziggy and is definitely an influence from Terry Burns.
Yeah, I've heard people say that too, that like there were layers to him. Like you would be the Bowie you'd see on stage, and then there'd be the Bowie that you would meet off stage, and then there'd be obviously the Bowie personally.
Yeah. So that so Ziggy Stardust came out, and we had again this more. He went even further with the harder classic rock sound. He brought his band in with the Spiders from Mars, and it was definitely a harder rock kind of theme, as well as kind of more theatrical glam influence as well. And you can see this on the heavy guitar of Suffragette City and Moonage, Daydream, and Hang On To Yourself, all those guitar-driven songs. But also there were some nice ballads on that track as well, like Lady Stardust and Soul Love and
Starman,
Rock and Roll Suicide. Because he had a very theatrical voice, a very glam rock voice, and that, I guess, came from a lot of his theatre and that sort of stuff. So
all the avant-garde stuff. Yeah.
And so that made a big I was going to say slash there for a second. Splash. It might have made a slash as well. And also with Ziggy Stardust, he took on this androgynous look, which kind of, and in an interview he actually came out as bisexual, which he was the first major kind of musician to come out sexually in public, and it didn't really have an impact on him negatively, because he became an instant superstar and one of the biggest pop stars in music at the time, particularly in the UK, and less so in the US. That would come slightly later, but he was definitely grabbing the torch of androgyny and sort of ambiguity and visually, which would become bigger and bigger as the 70s went on. Yeah, so Ziggy came out. It didn't do too well commercially. It was the following album, Aladdin Sane, which is almost like Ziggy number 2. They're kind of one and the same, and because Aladdin Sane is like another kind of persona. It isn't Ziggy, but it's this other guy. And again, Aladdin Sane comes back to that whole kind of influence from Terry Burns kind of thing. He was very into the sort of mental sort of themes in his work, and a lot of his songs reflect that. You had songs like All the Mad Men and that sort of thing, and the album title Aladdin Sane also sort of suggests that it's heading in that sort of area thematically. So that was a big success. It went to number 1 in the UK, and he was the best-selling UK artist in 1973. But despite the success of this, he, out of the blue, decided in a concert in July 1973 to retire Ziggy and declared on stage, "This is our final show ever. Thank you, good night, goodbye," and so shocks everyone.
He had only been performing as Ziggy for about a year. That's completely understandable, because he got to the point where he was so immersed in this character that he had this identity crisis. He became unsure of who he was, and he started saying that Ziggy wouldn't leave him alone. So that's quite a frightening concept. That you get to the point where this other persona is starting to control you and starting to pester you mentally. So he had to retire it at that point.
So that period sort of came to an end, and he took a massive U-turn around sort of 1974 and moved to the States, moved to New York, and changed style completely, moving into a sort of Philly soul, plastic soul, blue-eyed soul, glam soul.
So maybe some listeners might not be aware of what plastic soul and blue-eyed soul refer to.
Silly terms, really. It's just basically a white person singing black soul music, essentially. But that's the direction he went down, much to the surprise of everybody. And not everyone took it on board. A lot of people didn't like it. But it was just a desire to, like you said, move on from the Ziggy persona and leave that kind of rock god kind of thing behind. And
yeah, he left all the Spiders from Mars band members behind him.
And he basically moved to New York and Philadelphia and took influence from the music scenes that were going on there and the music he grew up listening to, like R&B and soul and Motown and all that sort of thing. And of course, in the mid sort of this period here, 74, 75 is a bit of a golden period for black African American music with a lot of great artists around, and I guess he wanted to be part of that.
It's like the explosion of funk music and funkadelic soul and
Stevie
psychedelic
Wonder,
soul,
Curtis Mayfield, Marvin Gaye, and it basically became a major obsession for him. He just wanted to do it, and in many ways sort of directly copy it, but at the same time put his own spin on it, and that's what he tried to do with the albums Diamond Dogs initially, and then Young Americans as well.
Diamond Dogs sort of sets the foundation there, because it's very much like similar to Aladdin Sane and Ziggy, because it's got that hard glam rock feel, but there's this kind of interweaving moments of soul
like
and funk.
Sweet Thing.
Yeah, and 1984 sounds like a track from like a blaxploitation, like Superfly or something. Lots of those sort of heavy strings.
And Rebels on there.
Yes, one of his most famous songs. Yeah.
You got your mother.
And when he would perform this on stage, like apparently they just ran out of, they blew all their money with the theatrical adaptations of this show. It was choreographed by
big stage show
by Tony Basil.
During Space Oddity, he would go out on a cherry picker over the audience and perform. And one time, apparently, it got stuck, and he got stuck up there and had to finish the rest of the show suspended in midair from this cherry picker.
Well, that would have been fun.
And during this time, he was a massive cocaine user. And if you've seen the film Cracked Actor, that was filmed on the Diamond Dogs tour, and it's a fascinating film, but he is really just fucked on coke.
He looks like a corpse.
He looks
pretty much
near death, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see his bones and his cheeks and his pale skin, and he's not making any sense when he's interviewed. There's this one scene in a car where he's like, "Oh, is that a fly on me or something?" I don't know. But that was around that time, really. So if he wanted to get away from the rock god kind of thing, well, the rock and roll lifestyle was really hitting him hard, big time. But yeah, so Diamond Dogs came out, and then Young Americans, which also contained a lot of great sort of musicians. Because what we're going to talk about is Bowie kind of teamed up with a lot of musicians throughout his career for different projects, and this was one of the examples of this, where he brought in Luther Vandross to be one of the backing vocalists, and a lot of great sort of soul session backing singers and musicians, and he really, really wanted to make a statement, I guess, to the black community as much as the white community, because he went on and performed on Soul Train, and he was the first white artist to perform on that program.
Right. Yeah, and the host, Don Cornelius, says, "Everybody welcome David Bowie."
Bowie.
And before he performs, he takes questions from the audience, and someone asks him, "How did you get into soul music?" And he says, "Oh, in Britain we would pop them, pop the street. We have street corners in Britain." And he's like giggling, and he's very clearly affected by whatever he'd taken off stage, probably most likely cocaine. And he lip syncs Fame and Golden Years, and he's sort of doing these kind of quirky dance moves on stage. And the audience are all primarily African American, and they're dancing as if it's like a disco song. And he's doing these sort of quirky, jumpy dance moves, and they're cheering him on. It's classic. It's look it up on YouTube. It's very entertaining.
So that was that, and then he changed again. This time, the character, the Thin White Duke, emerged with Station to Station, and he's still on coke at this stage, and he actually doesn't remember anything about making this album. But he became more interested in sort of European influences, and the Thin White Duke is based off a character he played in the film The Man Who Fell to Earth, which was an extraterrestrial being. And so again, the influence of space and aliens. A recurring theme in a lot of his work sort of came through strongly here as well. It's sort of more progressive, ambitious sort of elements on display.
Yeah, it sort of hints towards what he will do a couple of years later in the Berlin stuff. Because the title track, Station to Station, is just over 10 minutes long. And that's just like a continuing, progressive, funky rock jam. And it's the longest track that he had recorded on any album at that point. It might be the longest he'd ever made. I'm not sure about that.
And again, he teamed up here with Carlos Alomar, who also played on Young Americans, and would go on to play on the most Bowie records out of anybody, and he sort of contributes iconic guitars, so the sort of Stay and a lot of other tracks. Golden Years, and there's also George Murray on bass and Dennis Davis on drums, a team who he would play with quite a lot. So as I was saying, he became interested in European culture and identity and fashion, and this sort of manifested into this persona, the Thin White Duke, where he had this sort of the blonde bleach hair and the slicked back look and the black, and very much different from Ziggy.
But this was when he started to take a retreat from his cocaine use, and he started to look elsewhere outside of music. So he moved to Switzerland, and he started painting, and he started making these postmodernist and expressionist art pieces, and he also started to study classical music and literature.
And he teamed up with Brian Eno and Robert Fripp from King Crimson, moved to Berlin, and They set work on recording what became known as the Berlin Trilogy, which is a very influential series of albums. Some say probably the highlight of his career.
Yeah, my personal favourite period for Bowie. I mean, these are the albums that I can just go back to again and again and again, and they're still absolutely timeless. So he moved to Berlin at the end of '76, and he lived in an apartment which was quite near the Berlin Wall, and he was living in this apartment with Iggy Pop and Brian Eno. And he worked very closely with Iggy Pop for his albums The Idiot and Lust for Life.
Also, just a plug for Iggy, they're very good albums. You should check them out.
Yeah.
You can actually hear a lot of Bowie influences on those albums, and he plays sax as well.
And he went on tour with him in 1977, and Bowie doesn't sing or do anything on it. He just plays piano on that tour. And there's a video of them being interviewed on the Dinah Shore show, and there's Rosemary Clooney, who's also supposed to be interviewing them, but she just kind of sits there stunned as Iggy Pop and David Bowie are talking about their life. And at one point, Dinah Shore asks Iggy, so what do you think of your major achievements? And he says, well, I helped wipe out the 60s.
Yes, that's right. That's a famous line.
Everyone laughs.
Yeah.
It's a great interview as well.
Yeah.
And the Berlin Trilogy saw Tony Visconti come back as a producer and instrumentalist. And you can kind of hear in that trilogy, he has this fascination with kind of avant-garde, experimental,
ambient
minimalist.
music.
Yeah, thanks to Brian Eno as well.
Yeah. And krautrock.
Yeah.
Kraftwerk.
Yeah, so at the time there was this kind of growing krautrock movement. So it's like German progressive experimental music.
Can.
Yeah, so Kraftwerk, and Neu.
Neu.
And the influence is not so much on the music, but also on his on a bigger scale, his songwriting, because he no longer writes music from a narration point of view. So as a character, it kind of shifts and it becomes very surreal and abstract, and the lyrics don't quite make as much sense, and they're kind of very kind of surreal in that sense.
Like Joe the Lion.
Yeah, pretty much all the lyrics.
Beauty and the Beast, or whatever that song is.
Pretty much all the lyrics from Low.
Yeah.
Blue, blue, electric blue, that's the colour of my room.
Where I will live.
Yeah, it's
blue, blue. Joe the Lion!
But when Low came out, nobody really liked it. It was a critical flop because it was just so different from anything else he'd done. Imagine buying that album and you put on the A side and you're like, okay, this is kind of very strange rock, kind of, I don't know what this is. And you put on the B side.
And it's all this ambient,
and it's all this,
music.
And they'd probably be like, what is this noise?
It's like a Brian Eno record.
Yeah. So no one liked it, and his label was so paranoid about it that they tried to stop it from being released, which really kind of angers me, because why would you get in the way of such beautiful, beautiful art? And in '92, Philip Glass, who's quite a famous contemporary composer, he said that Low was a work of genius. He said that Bowie had a gift for making fairly complex pieces of music masquerading as simple pieces. And I would agree with that completely, because Bowie has this amazing ability to take these abstract, kind of surreal concepts and make them so accessible and catchy. That's kind of what really draws me to his music as well.
Well, out of the Berlin Trilogy, Heroes is my favourite album, and one of my favourite Bowie albums. It's just the sort of encapsulating the image of the Berlin Wall and the divide, and sort of a dead East Berlin versus a sort of a thriving West Berlin, and the Cold War still in play. And the title track obviously is just a masterpiece, and I think for a lot of people his best song, their favourite song, and just how these two sort of lovers separated by this structure, and then it starts with this driving.
Because he was living right near the Berlin Wall, and I think while he was living there, I think a few people were actually gunned down and killed by the tower people trying to flee to the other side. And
when he died, the German Foreign Office posted a tweet saying thank you for helping bring down the wall.
That was a nice touch.
That was a nice touch.
Yeah.
No, I really like Robert Fripp is a big influence on this album. His guitar is just electric throughout this whole thing, with a great sort of distorted kind of experimental guitar going on, and really, really awesome.
It's really kind of like just like a part two to Low.
Yeah, absolutely, and Lodger, which came as well, and even Station to Station. I think they were four kind of linked together, to be honest. And
also in '77, he made this incredible duet with Bing Crosby.
Good on you, Bing.
On television, he's saying "Peace on Earth" and
Little Drummer Boy. Yeah, it's a great video. You should watch it.
I love the little jabs they have at each other, because Bowie's like the new school kind of avant-garde guy, and Crosby's like this old school.
Traditional.
And he says to him, Bowie says to him, "Oh, you're that uncle from America that sings, right?" And Crosby sings, well, right or wrong, I sing either way. And he went on tour in 78, and by that point he had completely kicked his cocaine and drug addiction, so it was completely gone. And there's a live album called Stage, which captures that performance. And then the year later, he performed on Saturday Night Live, and that's another classic performance, and that's not on YouTube, but if you just Google it, you'll find it probably on Daily Motion. And he performs TBC 15 from Station to Station, and Boys Keep Swinging from the album Lodger. And he's accompanied by Klaus Nomi, who's a German art pop avant-garde singer and performance artist Joey Arias. And in this performance, in the first one, which is TBC 15, he is wearing this blue stewardess costume. And originally he was just going to wear a suit, but he saw what Klaus Nomi and Joey were wearing. He said, I have to match you guys, because they were wearing black and red, like kind of stewardess outfits. And then the second track, he performs Boys Keep Swinging, and that's where his face is superimposed on a puppet, and it's dancing around the stage. Very interesting and kind of visually striking as much as it is sonically striking. I think he also sings Man Who Sold the World as well. And he's wearing this massive kind of dress tuxedo thing, and it's so heavy he can't move. So Klaus and Joey have to pick him up and move him to the front of the stage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he can sing, and he does this. He puts his waves his hands around.
Oh dear.
It's very, very funny.
So that's the end of the 70s, and we now get to the 80s, the big bad 80s. And for a lot of musicians from the 60s and 70s, the 80s was a disastrous period musically. But not so for Bowie in the first half. We're going to talk about this later stuff, but basically at the start of the decade, he was kind of becoming more and more influenced by what was going on musically at the time in sort of synth pop and new wave.
New Romantics.
And this was evident on his first record of the decade called Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, which is a good album. In patches, it's a bit kind of iffy, but there's some good tracks on there. I mean, Ashes to Ashes is just one of his best ever songs.
It's an amazing song. I love that song.
And his video also is kind of, again, showing his sort of how he wanted to keep in touch with the current generation, making good video that would be shown on MTV and
very innovative music videos.
Very well directed.
Yes, kind of the beginning of Bowie's legacy of incredibly artistic music videos that he would kind of keep doing through the 80s and 90s, even up right until the end.
Yeah.
So there are a few new romantic musicians that he brought in for that video. And he kind of built on that progressive, surreal stuff from the Berlin trilogy, but he kind of made it a bit more easily accessible for general audiences, and that's what people termed as art pop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fashion is another track that kind of fits into that kind of thing.
And Robert Fripp returns to play on that album, and so does Pete Townsend from The Who.
And Ashes to Ashes went to #1 in the UK charts. And then in the following year, 81, he teamed up with Queen to release Under Pressure, which was another #1 hit for both of those artists.
And a big hit for Vanilla Ice.
Shut up. But then his popularity really took off in 1983 with Let's Dance, which was his first significant global breakthrough. I'm talking worldwide here. It went to #1, and I had a look a couple of weeks ago, more than 10 countries, I think. And suddenly Bowie was this big mainstream pop star playing big arena shows all over the place. Because interesting, I've always considered Bowie to be a bit of a cult act.
Right.
Not completely mainstream, but not completely unmainstream. But this album just turned him into this massive superstar. And he wanted it, basically. He had tired, I guess, of just being this kind of artsy guy and carrying these personas. And he wanted to be the star. And so he had this bleached blonde hair and started wearing suits and walking around hotel lobbies. And basically this all started off when he called Nile Rodgers the King of Disco
from Chic
to help him make a hit album. The story is he knocked on Nile's hotel room door and said, "Nile, darling, I want to make a hit record." Something along those lines. So they did it. They achieved it. And he also brought in Stevie Ray Vaughan to play on that record, who was also kind of establishing himself as a blues guitarist at the time. And there were some really good tracks on there. So a lot of big singles, like you had Modern Love, China Girl, Let's Dance, Cat People. So it was a very sort of slick, poppy, sort of dance kind of style, which again was kind of big at the time in the mainstream. And definitely Nile Rodgers' influences all over that album.
And he toured in 83, Serious Moonlight Tour, and he brought Earl Slick along with him.
Earl Slick played on Station to Station and would also appear as his guitarist on a lot of his other albums and also his final tours. But it turns out later that Bowie does not look back fondly on this period. The reality is probably the period most people remember Bowie for, Let's Dance, and but he hated it basically.
After Let's Dance, he kind of falls into a bit of a creative lull.
He does, yeah.
So he tries to follow up Let's Dance with Tonight. So he kind of tries to continue that kind of very accessible pop stuff, but it's just very bland, and there's a terrible cover of Beach Boys' God Only Knows on there. But he works with Tina Turner on that album, and he releases Blue Jean, which is probably the most famous song from that album. And he performs that song at Live Aid. And speaking of Live Aid, he teamed up with Mick Jagger to do Dancing in the Street.
Okay!
Yeah, that is probably the most hilarious video, which is unintentionally hilarious, ever made. And oh man, those dance moves.
And that thing, that trench coat that he's wearing,
Yeah.
with the floral pants, what the hell's that? And there's actually an edited version of that on YouTube where they take out all their music and it's just them dancing and
shuffling
and squirming, and I think Bowie burps in one scene, or it's just crazy. And of course the rumour is around the time that Bowie and Jagger were having an affair or something. And if you watch that video, then it kind of hints in that direction.
So the year after that, 86, he takes the role of Gareth the Goblin King in the Jim Henson film Labyrinth.
Dance, magic dance.
Yeah, and he composes the soundtrack with Trevor Jones. And Magic Dance is like a cult favourite of Bowie's. Like, I wouldn't say it's like one that people look at as, oh, it's in the top 10, you know, but it's a cult favourite.
For a lot of people from our generation, that was their first discovery of Bowie.
It was my first impression of Bowie was from Labyrinth. And I love that soundtrack. I still play that soundtrack.
Right.
Some great Bowie song. Very cheesy 80s pop, but
Who wasn't doing that at the time?
it's so nostalgic. It's great. And so then his first really bad album was Never Let Me Down, and even he looks back on that and says it was awful. And then he went on tour in 87, and this tour was very widely criticized because it was just so overproduced, and it was so kind of imitating and pandering this stadium rock scene that was going on. And it just kind of killed his solo career for a few years. And around that time, he decides to form the band Tin Machine in 89.
Where he was just another member. He made a big deal to be democratic and not be like the main star. And he gave songwriting credits to all the other people in the band.
And the problem was that people would go to see Tin Machine. They wanted
Bowie.
Want to see Bowie. He would just be playing guitar. He wouldn't be doing anything else.
And they wanted Bowie songs, but he wouldn't be playing Bowie songs.
No. Even though it was supposed to be democratic, he would still be the driving creative force behind them. So it was a bit of a failed endeavour in that kind of sense. But he did meet Reeves Gabrels, who he would work with very closely throughout the 1990s.
And with that, we moved to the 1990s.
Yes.
And I guess, in many respects, it was a bit of a mini revival with enough decent records in the 90s. He kind of got his mojo back as a attraction, as a live act again, and did a lot of gigging during this period. The Sound and Vision tour was widely acclaimed in 1990.
And a Tin Machine finally dies in
God.
92. And Bowie decides to revive his solo career, but he does keep Reeves Gabrels around to help him out with some of the songwriting and producing on his solo stuff. And he releases Black Tie, White Noise in 93. Nile Rodgers comes back, and it is a massive success. It's #1 on the UK charts. And there's sort of like there's elements of soul and jazz and hip-hop. And I didn't really enjoy that album too much, but it is like he's starting to get back to that kind of theatrical, artistic sense that had completely gone away by the end of the 80s.
There's one good song I like on there that's a Morrissey cover.
Oh, yes.
Which was written by Morrissey for his solo record at the time. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's a real kind of soulful arrangement. And, the thing I like about Bowie is that people forget he had a really soulful voice, a bit of a crooner soulful voice. And you can hear that in a lot of his more soulful songs, like I think of TVC15. Hold you, hold you, hold you, hold you.
So this is a period which I had no knowledge of until I started to look at the stuff very recently, and I think this is a very underrated period of Bowie's work. Cause
you like Outside, don't you?
I don't love it, but I really enjoyed listening to that album. It's probably his longest, like it's just over 70 minutes.
Yeah, really long.
But it's like a concept piece. It's based on this novel he'd written. It's like all these narratives of art and murder and chaos, and it's got a little bit of industrial music running through it.
Of course, here he teamed up with Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails.
Yep.
And that's kind of where a lot of the industrial rock influences probably came in.
And it's got the song Strangers When We Meet, which I think is like one of his best. I'll put that up there with like his best work.
High praise.
And he toured with Nine Inch Nails to support this tour, and people were completely taken aback.
Well, I guess a lot of the alternative rock crowd would have been introduced to him for the first time.
That's right, yeah. And then in '97, he had his 50th birthday concert in Madison Square Garden, and there's a photo of Bowie on a couch, and there's all these really cool indie alternative musicians around him.
Dave Grohl,
Robert Smith,
Billy
Corgan, the Sonic Youth peeps.
Yep. Pixies.
Yeah, Black Francis is there, yeah. So if you,
street cred, bro. Street cred.
So if you want to be really cool and hipster, you can bring up that photo and be like, oh, look, and see how many people you can name.
Yeah.
Who has the biggest hipster cred?
Absolutely.
I can probably name about half of them if I tried. But yeah, there's a lot of cool people in that concert as well. And then in '99, he released Hours, which was based on a soundtrack he had worked on for a video game called Omicron. And I was fascinated to find this out, that this was the very first album by a major artist to be released on the internet.
Oh, really?
By a download, yeah.
Well, around about that time, there's that famous interview of him talking about the internet.
Yeah, he predicts the internet is going to overtake
mainstream forms of technology,
of digestion and
distribution and information.
Yeah,
and the interview, Jeremy Paxman is just laughing at him, really.
But you can say what you want.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
But no, it's just a fascinating interview. You should really go watch that.
Yeah, it was a great interview. He kind of predicts the future,
literally.
Like our lives revolve around the internet at the moment, and Bowie had seen that when it was in its very early stages. Yep. Like, imagine downloading this album on dial-up.
In 1999.
It would have taken hours.
Yeah. And this is pre-Napster as well.
Yeah, and he had made a songwriting contest on the internet, and the winner had the lyrics featured on the album, and also got to perform vocals on the album via a live webcast, which was really cool as well.
So when he wasn't kind of setting the trend artistically and visually, he was setting the trend technologically as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a real trailblazer.
Yeah, that's another actually a pretty good album that I like. Okay. And in 2002, he worked with Tony Visconti again, and he released Heathen.
I listened to that for the first time the other night, and I was very impressed.
Yeah, I listened to it very recently too. I really enjoyed that album.
Because I think a lot of people neglect Bowie's period post Let's Dance and pre kind of the next day. They don't even want to try it. They just go on what's been written about it, and that most of it's shit. But if you go listening to it, you can actually find the odd kind of gem in there. And Heathen is one of those.
And especially if you listen to Blackstar and you want to hear where he was heading to get to that point, definitely go and listen to that 90s and 2000s stuff, because that is very indicative of where he was going.
And particularly on Heathen, I think.
Yeah, Heathen especially, outside to an extent as well, but Heathen in particular, which I kind of heard and I was like, this is like a best of Bowie. You've got this art rock, you've got this hard rock, you've got this soulful stuff. I think Slow Burn is an amazing song, one of my personal favourites of his actually. Pete Townsend plays on that track. And some of the melodies in that album are very reminiscent of Blackstar as well.
And then in 2003-04, he goes on the Reality and a Reality tour. And just in the last few weeks, I've been going and watching some of those concerts on YouTube. And he's still got it as a live performer, even at this stage. Still kind of just belting out the songs with a great vocal performance and a great band. And he headlined Glastonbury in 2000, I think it was. And he was popular again.
But then he started to have some health problems.
Well, yeah, he had a heart attack on stage, I think it was, in 2004. And this pretty much led him to quit touring, well, for good, basically. Because he wouldn't go on a tour again after 2004 and had sporadic live performances.
So he kind of became a recluse for about a decade. Yeah.
People thought in that time he'd retired from music completely, because he wasn't releasing any music. He was hardly ever seen. He popped up now and again for sort of little cameo performances. I mean, Extras is the obvious one in 2006.
Yep. But he wouldn't even do interviews. He wouldn't do music videos. I think he stopped doing music videos for Heathen as well. He said, I think he said something like, it's for the young people, and I'm not part of that anymore, so I'm not going to do that.
Right. But then out of the blue, on his birthday in 2013, he dropped a single called Where Are We Now, with a really interesting video where his head's superimposed into something, and it's a very interesting single. It's like, where are we now, where are we now? Very kind of Berlin Trilogy again,
Yeah.
Very abstract,
Yeah,
avant-garde.
like a ballad, sort of slow,
And
mournful.
completely, the internet just shut down completely. It's like, Bowie, he's back. Where's he been? I thought he was never going to release music again. And then he drops the single and announces he's got this album coming out the next day.
Right.
And that came out about a month later. And it was a stunning album, a stunning comeback after 11 years since his last record. And it had a lot of, again, like Heathen, a lot of sort of best of Bowie. There was Berlin, there was glam, there was soul, there was hard rock, there was krautrock, there was everything really. Yeah, and he released a couple of other good videos for that record, Valentine's Day, and a really good one called
The Stars Are
Out Tonight.
Yeah. So then I guess we move on to Blackstar.
You say that so somberly.
Still,
it's just like, do we really have to talk about this?
Okay.
So basically, what happened was he then went away again to be a recluse, and people constantly hounding people like Tony Visconti in the press. When is he going on tour? When is he releasing another album? And then basically he drops the song Blackstar, again kind of out of the blue.
But before that, he works on this Broadway musical Lazarus, which kind of is like pretty much the soundtrack for Blackstar.
Blackstar,
Yeah.
And then he drops the video for Blackstar, which is him playing a blind man, and there's all these weird dances in it, and it's like, in the villa of almond, something wrong. And then just in the middle it goes into this dramatic kind of soulful kind of bridge, and Bowie just sings a wonderful vocal full of soul and
The glam
influences, and then I'm a black star,
I'm not a gangster,
I'm a superstar,
and again Space and Aliens.
Yeah.
And the music video, so yeah.
Oh,
Some people are saying that's like
oh.
Major Tom Part 3.
And then with that is the announcement that the album's coming out as well, Blackstar, and that's the promotional single. And then we get the second single, Lazarus, which is kind of this jazz epic, and with it the very bleak video where he's lying in a hospital bed. It just, at the time, I was just like, what the hell is going on here? This is just creepy.
Very kind of moody and atmospheric.
Great song, though.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And in that video, you kind of see this like alternative Bowie demon, whatever, wearing this like black jumpsuit with like white lightning.
And he's trying to write a thank you note.
Yeah. And interestingly, that suit he was wearing was the same he would be wearing in the fashion shoots for Low when it came out. So that's like a little kind of reference, little nugget to that period of like artistic
and then
avant-garde.
Of course, the video ends with him walking back into a wardrobe and the door shuts behind him. And little did we know that these sorts of things were hinting at what was to come.
Yeah, that he was quite sick.
He was, and he passed away a couple of days after the video was
4
released.
days after.
4 days?
Yeah.
And the video was literally made a week before it was released. So that was like his last act, was him performing in this video, living out his ending, basically. And it's just amazing. I mean, who does that?
Yeah, everyone kind of realized that this was his final goodbye. It was
a gift to fans.
Yeah, it was an art project. He turned his death into an art project.
Yeah. Who does that?
Trying to think, like, anyone I could think of similar would be Jay Dilla, because he was diagnosed as well, and he was pretty sick, and then he decided to make donuts. That was his farewell. Right. But I think Bowie did it on a much grander and much more of a mindfuck level.
Totally.
Yeah.
And right through the album is little hints at kind of death and the end. I mean, look up here, I'm in heaven. I've got nothing left to lose.
I've got scars that can't be seen.
Yep. If I never see the evergreens again, I'm running to.
Yeah. I can't give everything away.
And then something happened on the day he died. Spirit rose a meter aside. Something stepped aside.
Yeah. It all suddenly made sense.
Because at the time I was trying to work out what all of this means. I couldn't really put a finger on it. I just thought he was being artsy, avant-garde.
Yeah. He tricked us because
completely fooled everybody.
So much of his career he put on this persona and this character, and you think, oh, he's just doing it again. But then it was actually him.
And so that was his parting gift. But musically, it's just a brilliant album. Putting aside the fact that it was his kind of dying kind of project, just musically, the jazz influence, the sort of avant-garde influences are all there. Wonderful band plays on the record.
I love the drumming.
And the saxophone playing is just brilliant.
So good.
great musicians, and vocally, Bowie just sounds wonderful as well. Still got it, even though he's sick and 69, sorry.
69, yeah.
He's still got it musically, and just think he could have continued to make music, probably.
Yeah, he had planned to make more albums.
Yeah, well, we might still hear some of that music, because he was demoed some songs before he passed away.
Okay.
So we still could yet see some new Bowie in the works.
We might get to see Toy as well. Do you know about that?
No.
That's like a collection of his very, very early records. So around that first self-titled Bowie album, that he had re-recorded around like the Heathen era, and he'd actually recorded a couple of those songs on Heathen, but a lot of them have been left.
Right.
Like they haven't. There's like bootlegs of it. Mm-hmm. So that could possibly see a release as well.
Oh yeah.
Which would be very interesting to hear.
Well, interesting, because I'm sure a lot of people haven't actually heard anything sort of pre Ziggy Stardust.
No.
And definitely not the first album. Like only hardcore fans or musicologists will listen to that stuff.
Yep.
Go and listen to it, people.
Yep. And then go listen to the 90s and 2000s stuff.
Yeah. Just go listen to everything. Yeah. Come on.
It's only 25 albums.
Yeah.
Only about 270 songs, about 18 hours. It's not that much.
Okay, so you're going to talk about his acting career.
Yeah, just very briefly, I just kind of selected some films that I thought were his kind of standouts, because he obviously he was a very prominent musician, but he had a very deep love affair with the arts in general, and acting, of course, is a big part of that. So obviously, Man Who Fell to Earth is an important one, because that's what kickstarted the Thin White Duke era, and with the falling to Earth and the alien theme and extraterrestrials and more space and aliens, and then Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. It's a prequel film to the Twin Peaks TV series. Had a little cameo role there. Zoolander, he played himself, where he was the judge of the model-off between Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson. Very, very funny scene. And of course, Extras, where he played himself. He made fun of Ricky Gervais.
Poor little fat man.
Chubby little loser.
Sold his soul.
For a shot at fame. Pug. A very, very funny scene as well. Playing himself, which he describes as his best acting moment. Playing himself in Extras. Very interesting.
Classic scene.
So now we're just going to go on to his influence on music and culture and fashion. So obviously he had a huge influence across a whole facet of art in general.
Not just music, but visually with his different personas and theatrical kind of thing that he had going with Ziggy, and
just the concept of putting on this character
and creating a sense of androgyny.
Yeah, and just like expression and free form, and showing people what you can achieve and what you can do.
And lots of people followed in his wake, like Alice Cooper and Madonna, Lady Gaga, Grace Jones.
Yeah,
all would have been influenced by Bowie.
Yeah, well, a whole slew of artists.
And that visually, I'm speaking here.
Yeah,
musically, he was also able to transcend genres in terms of influencing different genres outside of his own. It wasn't just the rock crowd he influenced, but he influenced people in electronica, pop, alternative, indie, hip-hop even.
Hip-hop, of course, yeah. A lot of these kind of very prominent producers in hip-hop kind of look at Bowie and look at what he did, especially with the experimental stuff. And a lot of Bowie's music has actually been sampled in hip-hop as well.
And that, I guess, comes back to how with each album, he kind of moved on from what he was doing previously and tried new sounds and styles, and wasn't just happy being safe in his comfort zone, but let's go and do something else. Let's make a soul record. And I think because he did that, and there's all these different sounds across his career, he's going to influence more and more artists, because there's something in his catalog that they can identify with.
And it's a good lesson for like current artists coming up.
Don't stay safe, move on to something else.
Try and avoid being stagnant.
And go and experiment and try things. And it might not always work out, but take risks, man. Too many artists are safe these days.
Yeah, too many modern artists are kind of doing the same thing
over and over again.
Adele.
Controversial. All right, so I thought we could end with just his legacy and what he means to us personally and the world. So I'd say that he's one of like a handful of artists who you feel like they're immortal almost. They're always there in the background, whether you're paying attention to them or not, and you just thought that they'd go on forever because their music is so powerful. And I just loved how he moved from different styles across albums and didn't just stay the same. He was always trying new things, and just his songwriting was just the themes he explored in his music was just, it told a story that was kind of not real kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just kind of letting your imagination run wild with all the different things he was talking about in his music.
For me, it was really like that, especially that Berlin period, but pretty much a large majority of his music. It's showing that you can have this real artistic merit in what you do and what you create, and you can have this like theatrical sense, and it's all about expression. And for me, especially with the experimental stuff, really kind of changed my concept of what music is and how music can be made and how music can be consumed. And so from that stuff, it's kind of set me on this path of experimental, and now I kind of have this weird obsession with experimental music thanks to that music. But pretty much all of his, like going back to the early stuff, and even the 90s and 2000s stuff, which I enjoyed listening to recently.
You couldn't pigeonhole into a genre category. He was all over the place.
No.
And as a music fan or historian, I just loved going back into his back catalogue and just looking at all the different things he'd done and listening to it. It was just made the listening that much more enjoyable, knowing that the next album you listen to is going to be different from the previous one. Because a lot of artists, you go back and listen to their catalogue, and a lot of their stuff's just kind of the same, and maybe it's just less of a journey. But this is a journey. If you go back and listen to all his albums,
There's always a distinct progression.
like
Yeah.
his first album is different from Let's Dance.
Right. Yeah.
There's like no similarities.
Yeah. And no two albums are really the same.
No.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Just want to say thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, David, for the music, the albums, the theatrics, the performances, the personas, the influences, the memories, everything really. Your sense of humour, your intelligence, and you will be missed. We honestly thought you were immortal.
Yeah, because he gifted us like
You've always been there.
From 1967
I
till 2016.
honestly hate to think how some people who are sort of in their 20s and the 70s are feeling at his passing.
Oh, they'd be devastated.
To them,
Totally
I mean, if you think me and you are devastated, well, those people must be 10 times more devastated.
Because they grew up as he was progressing. And,
yeah. And we're younglings. We've only been around 25, 6, 7 years.
I mean, I know we'll both be sad when Kanye dies.
I'll be devastated. Speaking of Kanye, Kanye West.
Yeah, of course, Kanye West on the
Ziggy Stardust album cover.
Yeah.
5 years.
5 years.
It all connects. You know, it's not just a coincidence. David Bowie predicted Kanye West, folks. You heard it here.
He's the star man. Kanye is the Blackstar.
He is the Blackstar. Jesus is the Blackstar.
There you go.
I mean, it is. I mean, swish. You know,
Waves.
we're just talking nonsense now.
Okay.
That's usually how our podcast ends.
Okay, so we're going to finish with our favourite albums.
Oh yeah. So what are your top fives?
So my favourite is Low, and then I'd probably say Heroes, Station to Station, Hunky Dory, and Let's Dance.
It's a very interesting selection there. Let's Dance is in the top 5.
Yep. Well, I'm
It's a good album, but
I'm a bit of a glutton for
some
catchy 80s pop music.
Yeah.
I can't help it. Modern love.
You like those synths and the drum machines.
Modern love.
Takes me to the church on time. I don't know when to go out. I don't know when to stay in. Get things done. That's one of the best opening lines of a song ever. My 5 favourites are Hunky Dory, Ziggy Stardust, Young Americans, Heroes, and Blackstar. I think Blackstar's just a masterpiece and right up there in his canon of great albums. But the thing is, he's got so many good albums, it's hard to pick your top 5.
That's the great thing. You can meet a Bowie fan and they'll have a different top 5.
5 to you.
Someone will have a different
Yeah.
top 5. Someone will love this song, you'll love that song.
They love that album. You hate that album.
Yeah.
It's like that's why it's great to be music fans.
That's the great thing about art. Yeah.
It is. Someone else's favorite is not yours.
And the great thing about Bowie, such a humongous career. You
Just
can
a massive, amazing canon of work. Yeah, and well, his all his albums have been re-emerging on the charts, on the top 40.
Exactly. Yeah. And singles too.
In a single, I mean, Blackstar went to number 1 all over the place and dethroned Adele. And all his other albums and lots of compilations as well have been appearing in the charts again, which is great. And that's hopefully it'll introduce a younger generation of people to his music.
And then they can introduce the next generation.
And they can go back and listen to Uncle Arthur and My Little Bombardier.
What's the one garden gnome?
The little garden gnome, yeah. All right, on that note, we will say farewell. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, it was a really fun to do this and research and talk about David, because he's one of my personal heroes. David Bowie.
He is a hero.
Yeah.
You know.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this podcast will have music on it and the copyright people won't come and be nasty to us again.
The robots.
Because they really hurt our feelings. So hopefully the robots don't come and take our bloody podcast down again.
Yeah, hopefully not.
We'll probably be on a SoundCloud. Are you thinking SoundCloud?
Most likely, yes. Yeah.
So that's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
See ya.